We're back. During an investigation that lasted from 2003 to 2007, federal investigators found out who leaked the identity of CIA agent Valerie Plame. No one was ever charged in the leak itself, but Vice President Cheney's chief of staff, Scooter Libby, was convicted by a jury in Washington of lying and obstruction of justice. Did Libby do what he did to protect the Bush administration's case for war in Iraq? And why did he think he'd get away with it? Libby's story is featured in a new book called Tangled Webs that profiles 3 other famous Americans: Martha Stewart, Scooter Libby, Barry Bonds, and Bernie Madoff. Let's focus on the actions here of Vice President Cheney's former top aide with the great author, James Stewart. He's a contributor to The New Yorker and Smart Money. James, you are prolific in your investigations. You have done due diligence here like I've never seen. I had a piece of myself in this story. I have to ask you, however, to answer some of the questions. Well, I think I understood this case from day one. They went into war. There was a lot of back and forth after we got into war when we found out there was no WMD. There was a big peeing match back and forth between the CIA, who didn't like being used the way they were, and the neocons in the Vice President's office and over in the Defense Department. And in that back and forth, they leaked the name of Valerie Plame on purpose. Now, there may be Armitage had part of it, but Scooter wanted to do it, and Karl Rove definitely wanted to do it. They were leakers. They wanted to nail that woman for being an agent of the CIA and their enemy. You're reporting now.
Absolutely. You're completely right about that. And one of the ironies to me of this story is that they decided they wanted to destroy Joe Wilson because they felt there were lies being told about them, and it wasn't fair to say that they were lying about weapons of mass destruction. So what did they do? They leaked the identity, and then under oath, I don't mean just saying it on TV or saying it in the newspapers, but under oath, Scooter Libby lied about it. And although Patrick Fitzgerald was criticized for being overzealous in going after him, and I admire his decisions, I think he made the right calls, but if anything, he'd be criticized for being underzealous because he could have gone after Karl Rove and Richard Armitage as well. And many people in that investigation thought he should have.
2 questions I want to come out of this with. Why did Scooter Libby, a guy who was a clean lawyer, who gave up a white shoe practice in Philadelphia, a prominent, successful attorney, comes down to Washington in the public interest? I know he's a conservative, but in the public interest, he comes down and works for Dick Cheney. He ends up basically committed. He gets convicted by a jury. They let him off, basically, the White House does. But he's a convicted guy. He did this. His career is ruined in many ways. Why did he keep secret all this time? Why won't he expose Cheney?
Well, look, this is the code of the Bush White House. And by the way, he was in many ways an honorable man, and maybe that's why he turned out to be such a bad liar. Because when I looked into this, I thought, well, was he possibly innocent? Was this unfair? He was a terrible liar. There were 9 witnesses that contradicted his story. He made up a story out of whole cloth, an alibi involving Tim Russert, who never supported it. He was a terrible liar. But why? The only answer that makes any sense is he was protecting Cheney. It's all spelled out in there.
Why didn't Cheney help him out by admitting the truth?
Which would have been so simple because, by the way, at that point, nobody would have cared. Nobody was indicted for the leak. But you didn't know that at the time. That's with benefit of hindsight. No one had admitted any errors in that White House, and that was part of the problem. And that's part of why people are led to lying. They insist on perfection in themselves and in others, and so when there are human failings, they don't admit it. I think it's a broad problem.
Did Cheney ever tell the
truth
to Bush?
Well, I don't know that he lied to Bush about this, but
no, did he ever tell him the truth?
The Cheney deposition, which I quote at length in the book, is a masterpiece. You could call it deception, evasion, whatever. He doesn't remember anything. He says things are possible.
No.
He wouldn't be surprised. He doesn't admit a single fact, which either means he was deceiving the public or, in my view, he wasn't mentally competent to hold the job.
Did Karl Rove lie to Bush?
I believe he did. The evidence strongly suggests, in a very dramatic confrontation, when asked point blank if he spoke to Novak about the identity of the CIA agent, he said the subject never came up. In his own grand jury testimony, he admitted that he was a confirming source for Novak, and the FBI agents felt that it was possible that lying to the chief executive like that was in and of itself a crime.
Great work. What a great book. I'm so glad you've done the work on this. You've done the due diligence, the honest reporting. I hope this goes down as the historic record. We needed one. I was involved a bit in this case. I'm so glad to see it on the record, factually put together by a nonpartisan reporter. James Stewart, you're a great guy, a great reporter. We needed one desperately to get the truth. Thank you.
Thanks
I hope everybody reads it just for the politics in it. That's my interest. It's probably a hell of a book overall. James Stewart, the name of the book, Tangled Webs.